Hey, Lee here, helping you become a better plant parent. Are you bored of your houseplants and soil? Do you have tons of time and a little bit of disposable cash? You don't? Let's talk about the pros and cons in LECA and then find out if you're in that small percentage of people to see if LECA is actually right for you. I've been growing my plants in LECA for about 2 years, and the one thing that I do love is that the plants consistently grow better and faster when in LECA than compared to my plants in soil. I find that the most important thing for indoor plants is fertilizing. And fertilizing is often the thing that people put on the back burner, especially if you're a new plant parent and especially if you accumulated a lot of new plants quickly. It's really the easiest thing to just say, I'll do it later. And I get it, in the short term, you're not gonna really harm your plant if you're not fertilizing, and it is tough to remember, especially if you're trying to use a liquid fertilizer that you need to use every time you water your plant. So if you're watching this and you're identifying with someone who's struggling to fertilize consistently, don't do LECA, just stop. I'm not saying that everyone has to be perfectly consistent when it comes to fertilizing and taking care of your houseplants, but when compared to your plants in soil, you need to be much more close to perfectly consistent when compared to having plants in soil. With LECA, assuming that your plants are established and have acclimatized to a full panel of nutrients, you're always going to be fertilizing your plants to the maximum that they can handle. If you're following the directions, your plants will be thriving perfectly. And any excess nutrients that the plant can't actually absorb ends up as salt and mineral buildup on top of your LECA, and you'll be cleaning this off as part of your cleaning routine on your flush days. And if you're obsessed like me with growing the absolute best looking plants that you possibly can and then bragging to your friends until Brian stops returning your text messages, then yes, absolutely, you need to start LECA today. And besides, his phone is probably just on silent. And with LECA, you can avoid so many pests. You can avoid fungus gnats, but you can get every other houseplant pest. You can get thrips, scale, mealybugs, spider mites, aphids, basically anything that feeds on the leaves of plants, you can still get. But on the bright side, you can finally rid your house of fungus gnats completely, but only if you convert every single plant that you own into LECA. And if you are struggling with fungus gnats, I have a video on how to help with that too. One of the biggest downsides to LECA is that if you're someone who struggles with consistency of care of your houseplants, then LECA is absolutely not the right choice for you. Most houseplants in soil, ferns and calathea notwithstanding, they can go a few days with neglect and underwatering. But plants in LECA, once their water reserve has dried out, this will cause a faster decline in the plants when compared to the ones in soil. You really have to have a good understanding of how fast your nutrient reserve depletes and be on top of refilling it appropriately. You also need to be pretty on top of making sure that your nutrients and pH adjusted water are constantly filled up. Now, while once you've memorized how much measurements every single thing needs, it doesn't actually take that long to make it, but the whole process of getting everything prepared and clean up afterwards can take 5 to 10 minutes. It's really not a quick, I'll just water this plant before I leave. It's kind of a whole process, and you need to be on top of it. Neglecting your plants is something that every plant parent does occasionally, but with LECA, neglecting your plants will end up with far worse looking plants when compared to neglect in soil. Transferring plants to a soilless medium like LECA or pond is a really popular topic in the YouTube community, and I honestly don't really get it. It doesn't make sense to me why you would want to take a plant out of soil that's been perfectly happy and healthy for months or even years to have them possibly struggle with that transition into a new medium. And this is why I don't really recommend transferring any of your high value plants over to a soilless medium, especially if they've been comfortable and established for a very long time. The risk is just way too much for me. And yes, some plants do perform much better when being transferred over from soil to LECA, but it's hard to know what plants those are unless you speak to someone who's actually tried it before. And with LECA, even if you have just one houseplant in LECA, your startup cost can still be around $100. Now, there are ways to mitigate the cost of that. For example, you can use a one panel nutrient. A good example is Dynagrow foliage, and that nutrient series works really well and targets specifically tropical plants like monsteras and philodendrons. And it comes in 8-ounce containers, so you can get it at a much more affordable price. Collecting houseplants can be an expensive hobby if you want it to be, and semi-hydro does have a higher startup cost when compared to soil, especially if you're looking for some good-looking self-watering pots. But because some of the nutrients and other ingredients associated with semi-hydro can last for so long, in about 2 to 3 years, it might actually be a little bit cheaper to be doing semi-hydro when compared to soil plants in the long run. But that's probably only if you're using really high quality soil. Getting started with LECA is also pretty high effort even if you just have one plant. You still need to be pH adjusting your water, and you still need to be mixing all of your nutrients. This is why I do think if you're going to get started with LECA, it might be best if you do convert every single plant that you own over to LECA. Another benefit of LECA is that once you do hit that 25 plant mark, it does seem to become a little bit easier. You do spend a little bit less time fussing over your plants when compared to soil plants, especially in the summertime when you would normally be repotting your plants. And no, I didn't just say that you need to get more plants in LECA to make things easier. I drew this extremely detailed graph to show you what I mean. The more soil plants you have, it gets much more difficult to care for them. With LECA, that rate is slower, and if you're getting self-watering pots, the difficulty or the time spent goes down even further. It's tough to say. Over the past 2 years, I've probably spent around $100 on all of the materials that I need for LECA, and that includes these mesh or net pots that I got at wholesale prices at a local hydroponics store. But if you're looking to be a small-time seller, yes, LECA is absolutely worth your time, especially because it produces plants much faster than compared to soil plants. So if you have the time, you have the cash, and you're willing to transfer almost 100% of your plants into LECA, then yes, LECA is absolutely right for you. Or if you're someone who's looking to get an investment plant to further fund your involvement within the hobby, then yes, LECA is for you because it does replicate those plants much faster. But if you're not one of those people, I really recommend liking the video if it was helpful, and consider subscribing. If you want to watch more videos on LECA, you can click here, and I'll see you next time.